Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, True Scary Stories. Where are you watching from tonight and what time is it in your country? Have you shared my channel with your friends yet, or are you keeping these whispers all to yourself? You lie there now, tucked in, staring at the shifting shadows your old lamp casts on the ceiling. You can hear the faint, low groan of the house settling, a sound that always feels less like physics and more like a sigh right before a confession. The window beside you is a solid black square of night, but you know what's beyond it. You know the dark shave of the woods, a thick, untidy knot of pine and oak that starts 50 yards from your back door. It's a familiar dark, the kind that smells of damp mulch and silence. But tonight, that dark feels edited. It feels as though someone took a pair of heavy shears and trimmed away the random, comforting chaos of nature, leaving behind something intentional. The air is suddenly cooler, and the faint, woodsy perfume is sharper, like a single chilling note played on a piano. You feel a strange sense of resignation creeping in, a calm acceptance that, honestly, you probably won't survive this story, but hey, at least you'll get a great final anecdote out of it, right? So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're currently hiding from the dark and what time it is there. I love knowing where these stories travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that low, unsettling hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It all started with the path. You woke up one Tuesday morning, and there it was. Not a deer trail, not a worn-down hunting track, but a freshly cut line through the undergrowth, starting maybe 10 feet from the corner of your lawn and disappearing into the dense, old-growth section of the woods you've always avoided. It was a scar, raw and straight, in the perfect green-brown tapestry of the late summer forest. You stand by the kitchen window, coffee cooling in your hand, and you try to rationalize it. Teenagers, maybe, cutting a shortcut to the old creek bed. But the path is too neat, the earth too smoothly disturbed. There are no snapped twigs jutting out, no careless footprints. It looks like a ribbon of brown velvet unspooled by something enormous and profoundly patient. It's only 10 feet long before it dips into the true, suffocating thickness of the trees, but it's the most unnerving 10 feet of ground you've ever seen. You remember reading once about the famous Bell Witch haunting, a story so persistent and well-documented that even Andrew Jackson claimed to have experienced it. What makes stories like that stick isn't the impossibility, but the way an ordinary place, a farm, a house, a patch of woods, suddenly stops obeying the rules and becomes the stage for something deeply unnatural. That path feels like a stage being set, just for you. You keep telling yourself it's a prank, a weird landscaping mistake by a neighbor you didn't know you had. But your house sits on a lonely 3-acre lot at the end of a dead-end road. Nobody cuts paths here except the things that already live in the woods, and they usually prefer tangled obscurity to straight-line efficiency. For 3 days, you watch it. In the morning, when the mist rolls off the pines, the path looks like a pale, wet wound. By noon, when the sun briefly hits it, the disturbed earth seems to soak up the light, rendering it dimmer than the surrounding leaf litter. You find yourself pacing your house, the path pulling at the corner of your vision like a persistent low-grade fever. It's the unsettling quiet near the path that finally compels you. You're used to the noise of the woods, the cicadas, the wind rustling leaves like dry parchment, the distant cry of a hawk. But near the entry point of this new path, the sounds simply stop. It's an aural dead zone. Even the birds seem to make a deliberate detour around the air above that freshly turned dirt. You step out onto the grass, the dew soaking through your socks immediately. You take a sip of your coffee cold now, tasting faintly of ash, and mutter to yourself, well, the coffee's already ruined. Might as well ruin the day, too. That's your first dark joke. You take 3 steps, and now you're standing at the path's entry. You can feel the coldness of the disturbed earth through your thin slippers. It's not just temperature. It's an emotional cold, an apathy seeping out of the soil. You know that according to a strange, old superstition, when you move into a new house, you should walk the perimeter of the property at midnight to ward off unseen entities. You realize with a shudder that this path is not on your perimeter. It's leading from your perimeter, like a vein sliced open and directing blood inward. You stand there, just inside the tree line, where the light is already failing, even though it's barely 4 p.m. You feel the pull, the subtle, magnetic insistence of the track. It's too neat, too purposeful. It's inviting you to take ownership of a terror you didn't even know existed. You wonder if this is how all those people who just walk off into the wilderness in missing persons reports feel. A sudden, powerful, and utterly unreasonable urge to simply follow a line until it resolves itself. You shift your weight, feeling a familiar tension in your shoulders. Why do you always have to be the protagonist in these terrible stories? I guess if this path leads to a gold vault, I'm the luckiest fool alive. If it leads to a pit of flesh-eating slugs, well, at least I won't have to do laundry anymore. That's the second darkly humorous thought of the day, a pathetic attempt to use cynicism as a shield. You take the first step onto the path, and the leaf litter crunches under your foot with a dry, sharp sound. It's immediately clear the ground here is different. It's not soft. It's packed down, as though thousands of journeys have already been made here. But this path only appeared on Tuesday. The logic doesn't align with the sensory information. You take a deep breath of the woodsy air, and you realize something crucial. The path goes slightly downhill. It's a gentle, almost imperceptible slope, but it gives the impression of being pulled along, not walking freely. You walk deeper, and the trees close ranks above you. The sound of the wind is muted now, replaced by a low, rushing silence that seems to be produced by the woods themselves. You reach out, touching the bark of a pine tree that feels unusually smooth and damp. You glance back at your house, but it's already gone, swallowed by the density. That quick erasure of the familiar is a shock. It feels less like distance and more like a curtain being drawn. You think about those scholarly debates you sometimes read about. Researchers disagree on whether sleep paralysis is purely a neurological misfiring during the REM cycle, or if there is an external, environmental component that primes the mind for such terrifying hallucinatory events. As you stand on this impossibly straight, unnervingly silent path, you start to believe the latter. This path, this perfectly straight line in nature's chaos, feels like an environmental trigger, a neurological anomaly made manifest in dirt and dead leaves. You take another step, and another. Your feet are moving of their own accord now, a grim determination replacing the initial curiosity. This is the moment you commit to the narrative, isn't it? The point of no return, where the main character ignores the clear red warning sign. You try one last joke. A whispered plea to the silent trees. If anyone asks where I went, tell them I was looking for a decent Wi-Fi signal. That's a truly scary story. You're not trying to be funny, really. You're trying to prove you still have a voice. The woods are pulling you in, away from everything you know, along this path that shouldn't exist, this path that appeared at your doorstep like a misplaced invitation. You glance down at the ground again, and you notice something you hadn't before. The disturbed earth, freshly tilled, is already healing. Tiny pale roots and new sprigs of grass are already pushing up, obscuring your own footprints even as you make them. It's not just a path, it's a wound that wants to close, and it wants to close with you inside it. You look ahead, and the path, impossibly straight, seems to glow slightly at the end, not with light, but with absence. You walk, your steps feeling heavy and yet strangely weightless, as if the path itself is carrying you forward, making the effort optional. The air is still cold, heavy with that metallic scent of wet earth and something else. Something vaguely mineral, like rust or old blood. You've noticed that the path doesn't curve around the trees. Rather, the trees seem to have been removed for the path, or perhaps they simply agreed to step aside. It's a terrifying thought that the natural chaos of the forest is yielding to an imposed order that originated just outside your home. You keep moving, trying to reconcile the sight of the perfectly straight trail with the knowledge of how impossibly dense this woods is. The trees here are old, their trunks thick with moss, their branches interlocking to create a cathedral ceiling of shadow. There's no easy way to remove them, no sign of a bulldozer or a chainsaw. The only evidence of work is the path itself, smooth and unsettling. You remember a grim piece of true crime history, the Bloody Benders, a family of serial killers in Kansas in the 1870s who ran an inn and murdered travelers. Their infamy wasn't just the killing, but the chilling method of disposal. They dug a pit beneath the house, making the crimes a deeply private, internalized affair. This path feels like that pit, a private entrance, an invitation to doom that only you received. You stop suddenly. A few feet off the path, nestled between the tangled roots of a massive maple, is a stone. It's not a natural stone, but something carved, worn down by time or perhaps by deliberate erosion. It's low to the ground, maybe the size of a loaf of bread, and completely unmarked save for the rough, hand-chiseled outline of what looks like a single, crooked line pointing back the way you came. You crouch down, the damp air raising goose flesh on your arms. You reach out, but stop your fingers just short of the stone. It feels cold, colder than the surrounding dirt, radiating a palpable chill that makes your teeth ache. This stone feels like a forgotten marker, a surveyor's boundary from a time when people took property lines seriously, maybe too seriously. You try to scoff it off. Great, you whisper, a trail marker that just says you are here. Go back. Thanks for the useless advice, ancient cartographer. That's the first joke, delivered with a shake in your voice. This discovery brings to mind an obscure bit of folklore about fetches or doppelgangers, which some traditions claim are not just visual doubles, but actual spectral entities that walk the world just ahead of a person, heralding their imminent death. The fetch follows the path of your life and marks the end. You start to feel a terrible, sick certainty. This stone isn't marking a property line, it's marking your path, and the crooked line is a crude arrow pointing to your last stop. You force yourself to stand up, turning you back to the cold stone. You decide to check your phone. No signal, of course. Not even a blip of service. The woods have become an absolute blackout zone, not just for sound, but for all connectivity. Well, at least I won't get any annoying telemarketing calls down here. Who needs a landline when you have existential dread? Second joke, do you find yourself relying on these small bursts of gallows humor, desperate attempts to keep the narrative voice separate from the terrified reality? The air here is thick with a strange silence, a silence that seems to whisper rather than simply exist. It's an auditory hallucination, a constant low-grade hiss like sand being poured onto velvet. You look back at the stone one last time. You see something you missed before, near its base, where the dirt meets the moss, a slight indentation, perfectly circular. It looks like a shallow bowl has been pressed into the ground. You turn and walk forward again. Now you're deep enough that the trees are filtering the sunlight into green-black splinters. The path is still straight, still impossibly smooth. You feel the ground shift slightly beneath your feet, and you realize you're walking on an old, forgotten bed of pine needles, perfectly preserved, yet somehow freshly exposed. You look down, and the trail is starting to look less like dirt and more like compacted, finely ground wood. You wonder about the origin of the path. Is it something made or something uncovered? This is where the academic mind kicks in, even in the face of terror. Historians still argue whether the Voynich manuscript, a bizarre illustrated codex written in an unknown language and dating back to the early 15th century, contains encrypted real-world scientific or pharmacological information, or if it is merely an elaborate, highly convincing hoax with no underlying meaning. You realize the path is your own personal Voynich manuscript, a compelling, perfectly formed mystery whose purpose is impossible to decipher. Is it real? Is it a human trick? Or is it a language you simply haven't learned to read yet? As you walk, you notice the shape of the trees changes subtly. They are all leaning slightly inward, not toward the sun, but toward the path, their highest branches forming a continuous arch. It's an unnerving posture, like the woods are bowing to something, or, perhaps, guarding it. You touch your face, realizing your skin is clammy. The temperature has dropped sharply. You remember the simple joy of that cold cup of coffee in your kitchen, now seeming like a relic from a different geological era. You shake your head, dismissing the fear, trying to focus on the technical details of the woods. You even try to appreciate the aesthetics. You know, this would make a great setting for a nature documentary. Title, Local Idiot Takes a Stroll Off the Map. It'll win 0 awards, but it's honest. Third joke, a little louder this time. You push deeper into the encroaching shadow. You feel the cold of the marker stone still clinging to the tips of your fingers, even though you never actually touched it. That's the thing about this path. Its effects are delayed. Its horror is an echo that arrives long after the source. You keep walking, pulled by the unsettling efficiency of the straight line. You can hear your heart now, a dull, rapid thump-thump-thump that seems to be the only sound that hasn't been muted by the unnatural hush of the surrounding forest. You realize you've been walking for what feels like an eternity, but when you check your internal clock, the way your body tracks time, it suggests only 10 minutes have passed. The light, however, has gone from afternoon dimness to twilight shadow. Time is compressing here, warping around the path like a disturbed gravitational field. You need to turn back, but the idea of retracing your steps, of passing the whispering marker again, of seeing that single crooked line pointing you back into a reality that no longer seems to fit, is suddenly unbearable. You must continue, if only to find out where this thing terminates. You have to find the end of the line, because you have a growing, terrible suspicion that this path wasn't made to lead you to something, but to lead you away from everything else. The path continues its relentless, unnervingly straight trajectory. You are deep in the woods now, past the point where familiar landmarks or childhood memories of this area hold any weight. The trees are taller, closer, and the ground beneath your feet is more compacted. You notice, with a sinking feeling, that the small, pale roots you saw trying to reclaim the path have stopped trying. The dirt is utterly bare now, submissive to the line. The sound that unnerves you the most starts to become distinct, a subtle, rhythmic, crunching sound. It's not the sound of your own feet. Your steps are a heavier, more familiar thud scrape. This other sound is lighter, drier, and always about 20 feet behind you. You stop, planting your feet and holding your breath. The crunching stops the instant you do. You wait, listening so intently your ears begin to ring. You hear nothing but the rush of silence. You take one slow, deliberate step forward, and 2 seconds later you hear it. Crunch, 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 keeping pace, mocking your hesitation. This deliberate silence, this uncanny obedience of sound, is far more disturbing than a loud noise. You remember the mainstream horror fact about the Winchester Mystery House in California, famously built by Sarah Winchester to appease the ghosts of those killed by her husband's rifles. What made the house so haunting wasn't the sheer size, but the irrationality of its design: stairs leading to the ceiling, doors opening onto nowhere. This path, so straight, so perfect, is the same kind of irrationality. It's an engineered space that makes no practical sense, existing only to confuse and entrap. You force yourself to keep walking, focusing on the mechanical act of moving one foot in front of the other. You try to convince yourself the crunching is an echo, a sonic illusion caused by the dense tree canopy, but the sound is too precise, too present. You look over your shoulder, a quick, jerky movement that makes your neck ache. Nothing. Just the endless straight line of the path disappearing into the gloom. "Well, I've always wanted a personal trainer," you mutter, trying to keep the panic from boiling over. "It's nice to know even in the woods, I have someone checking my steps. Probably logging my heart rate too. Very considerate." That's the first dark joke of this stretch, a pathetic attempt to humanize the thing tracking you. The closer you get to whatever this path leads to, the more you notice the specific vegetation. Everything is dark green, deeply shadowed, and covered in a fine, almost imperceptible layer of dust. Except for one plant, a single, vivid purple flower, blooming inexplicably in the exact center of the path, a few yards ahead. It's an impossible burst of color in the monochrome gloom. You slow down as you approach it. The flower is beautiful but looks fake, too saturated for the dim environment. Its petals are wet, even though the surrounding dust is bone dry. You know from the obscure folklore of the Bais and the Baba Yaga that deep forests often contain false beauty or dangerous gifts. A stunning mushroom, a strangely perfect flower designed to lure or distract. You decide not to touch it. The flower pulses slightly in the gloom, an optical illusion caused by the strained light, or maybe just your own frayed nerves. You step carefully around the flower, placing your foot on the path's edge. As you pass, you hear a faint, almost inaudible snap behind you, the sound of the flower being trodden on. You stop, your blood freezing in your veins. The crunching sound behind you has already stopped too. You refuse to look back. The thing following you isn't just following, it's confirming your passage, erasing the tiny anomaly you avoided. It is tidying up the path for the next observer, or perhaps for your return trip. You quicken your pace, a surge of pure adrenaline replacing the earlier resignation. The path responds, seeming to flatten and expedite your movement. The slope you felt earlier is gone, replaced by a smooth, almost lubricated surface. This is where the scholarly questioning comes in. Researchers disagree on whether human-induced panic behaviors are entirely separate from fight or flight responses, or if the heightened, often irrational decisions made under extreme stress are simply a corrupted, evolved form of the core survival instinct. You are definitely in a state of corrupted survival. You know you should turn and face the sound, but every cell in your body is screaming forward. You realize the total absence of insects is also a crucial detail. No mosquitoes, no gnats, no flies, nothing buzzing, nothing feeding. The air is sterile, cleansed of life's chaotic mess. This path is not part of the food chain. This is disturbing. If you die here, nothing will claim the body. It will just remain, perfectly preserved, like the path itself. A second dark joke slips out, a manic giggle escaping your lips. At least I won't have to worry about my allergies out here. It's so clean. Maybe this path is just a very, very serious HOA violation. I are laughing now, a dry, hysterical sound that the woods immediately swallow. You stop the laughter as quickly as it started. The sheer deliberateness of the path continues to overwhelm your senses. Every dead branch has been removed, every rock kicked aside. The air is perfectly still, perfectly quiet, perfectly cold. It's a corridor of profound wrongness. You reach a point where you feel you must stop and rest, but the idea of sitting down, of interrupting the flow of the path, feels like breaking a sacred, unknown law. You think about the creature behind you, the one making the dry, meticulous crunch on the ground. You have a sudden image of it being incredibly tall and thin, moving with an impossible, silent grace, only disturbing the small, dry debris with its weight. It doesn't seem to have hands, or maybe it just doesn't use them. It just walks, slowly, exactly at your pace, always 20 feet back. You force your attention back to your own feet. They are numb now, the feeling of the earth beneath them replaced by a generalized cold pressure. You look down, and your shoes are covered in the fine, dark dust of the path, the same dust that was dry on the ground but wet on the flower. You wonder if this dust is the soil of the woods, or something else entirely, the byproduct of what created this perfectly unnatural line. You realize you haven't seen the sun at all for what must be over an hour. You are now solely illuminated by the diffuse greenish light that filters through the thick canopy. You close your eyes for a moment, just a split second, seeking the comforting darkness of your eyelids. But when you open them, the light is slightly dimmer, and you have the distinct, terrifying feeling that the path is narrowed slightly. The trees are closer. They are impatient. Your final dark joke of the section is a tired sigh. This is worse than a team-building exercise. At least during those, someone brings donuts. This one just comes with a free, silent stalker. You keep walking, the crunching sound a grim metronome setting the pace for your final, involuntary journey. You can feel the unnatural clearing of Section 4 just ahead, a palpable, weightless pocket in the oppressive density of the trees. The path is almost there. It's almost done with you. The path opens. It doesn't transition or fade. It simply stops at the edge of a space that is so profoundly not woods that it feels like you've walked onto the surface of another planet. You step out of the dense, shadowed corridor and into a circular clearing, the sight of which makes your chest clench with instant, gut-deep dread. This is the unnatural clearing. It is a perfect, flawless circle, approximately 50 feet in diameter. The ground is not the dark, compacted earth of the path, nor is it the natural leaf litter of the forest. It is utterly bare, a clean, white-gray soil, tightly packed and smooth. Nothing grows here, no moss, no grass, no weeds, no fungal blooms. It is sterile, a petri dish that has actively rejected all forms of life. The trees surrounding the clearing don't lean inward as they did along the path. Instead, they lean sharply outward, their lowest branches bent back like the ribs of a defensive cage. The air here is thick, heavy, and completely still. It doesn't feel like a vacuum. It feels like the atmosphere has been pressurized, pressing down on your skin with an unsettling physical weight. The silence is absolute. Even the faint, low, rhythmic crunching that followed you down the path has ceased. The thing that was tracking you has either stopped at the entrance, or perhaps it doesn't need to crunch anymore, because now it is here. You force yourself to look up. Directly above the clearing, there is a circular gap in the canopy, a precise hole through the leaves. The sky visible through the hole is not a clear blue, but a sickly pale gray, even though the sun should be high. It's a custom-made skylight for a horror show. You stumble forward 3 steps, your shoes making no sound at all on the white-gray ground. The earth beneath you is cold, like polished stone, and it seems to absorb all light and sound. Do you remember the mainstreamed fact about the Dyatlov Pass incident, where 9 hikers died under mysterious and terrifying circumstances in the Russian Ural Mountains? The lasting horror of that case wasn't the deaths themselves, but the unexplained nature. The strange internal injuries, the inexplicably damaged clothes, and the fact that an experienced rescue team felt a deep, irrational fear just being at the site. This clearing has that same psychic residue, the feeling that the natural world was simply not enough to cause what happened here. You stand in the center, turning slowly, trying to find an exit other than the path you came in on. There are none. The trees are a solid, impenetrable wall of wood and root. You notice a detail about the trees. Their bark, facing the clearing, is pale and unnaturally smooth, as though the inner life of the wood has been bleached out by the atmosphere of this spot. The pressure on your chest increases. You take a breath, and the air tastes flat, metallic, and empty of oxygen. It's the flavor of pure absence. You try a dark joke, just to hear your voice break the silence. Well, this would be a terrible place for a picnic. No birds, no bugs, and I'm pretty sure that sky is just an old paint-can lid. The joke feels dead on your tongue, and the silence seems to chew on the words, mocking their futility. You notice something on the ground, near the center, where you are standing. A faint, almost invisible tracing on the white-gray earth. It's a pattern not etched into the ground, but on it, like fine dust, has been carefully swept away to reveal the texture of the soil beneath. You kneel down, ignoring the cold that immediately saturates your knees. The pattern is intricate, repeating. It looks like a simplified diagram of a human lung, or perhaps a spiraling galaxy. It has a definite, unnerving geometry. This brings to mind the obscure superstition of the corpse road or coffin path, ancient paths that were used historically to carry bodies to burial sites. The lore around these roads claims that they retain the spiritual residue of the dead, and sometimes, if you follow one, you can get caught in a temporal loop or be visited by a funerary ghost who insists on dragging you along. This clearing feels like the endpoint of a corpse road, the exact spot where the final ritual was performed. You stand up quickly, suddenly desperate to leave. The air here feels vulnerable. You've exposed yourself to whatever happens in the unnatural clearing, and the thing that was following you down the path is probably quite pleased. You start to walk toward the exit, but now, a fresh wave of panic hits you. You can't tell which way you came in. Every section of the surrounding tree line looks identical, impenetrable, outward-leaning, and bleached on the inner bark. You spin in a slow circle, your heart hammering against your ribs. The path you followed, the one that was so distinct, has perfectly merged with the forest boundary. It is gone. This is the point where scholarly logic utterly fails. Historians still argue whether the concept of genius loci, the protective spirit of a place, was purely a literary and philosophical concept, or if ancient peoples genuinely recognized a non-human agency in specific geographical locations. You decide, with chilling certainty, that this place has a genius loci, but it's not protective, it's possessive, and it has just locked the doors. You try the 3 o'clock direction, pushing at the tangled roots. They hold fast, thick, and unyielding. You try the 9 o'clock direction. Same thing. You realize the path was the only key, and now that you're inside, the lock has re-engaged. You try another dark joke, forcing a painful grin. Well, on the bright side, if I have to live here, I don't have to worry about finding the perfect wallpaper. This gray dust motif is actually quite modern. It's terrible, but it's a sound, and that's what matters. You feel a growing sense of detachment, a strange, floaty sensation. You look down at your hands, and they seem slightly pale, slightly transparent in the strange light. You realize you have stopped thinking about the crunching sound behind you. It's no longer an external threat, but a memory. The fear has changed. It's no longer the fear of being chased. It's the fear of being trapped and slowly forgotten. You turn back to the center of the clearing, and you see the geometric pattern on the ground again. You realize it's not a lung or a galaxy. It's a stylized, extremely simple depiction of a path, ending in a perfect circle. And you are standing in the center of that circle. A new noise starts, extremely faint, high-pitched, and wavering. It sounds like a single cello string being bowed very slowly, a note so low it vibrates in your bones instead of your ears. It is coming from the ground, from the white-gray soil itself. You drop to your knees, putting your ear close to the cold, dead earth. The sound is clearer now, a sustained, mournful tone that seems to be pulling the memory out of your mind, one thought at a time. The memory of your name, the memory of your car keys, the memory of where the milk is kept in your fridge. All of it is being drawn away, leaving a pleasant, terrifying blankness. You need to run. Now. You scramble back to the point where you entered, and this time, whether through sheer panic or a momentary failure of the location's spell, you see a faint difference in the tree line, the slight disruption where the path meets the clearing. You don't hesitate. You dive back into the gloom of the corridor, back onto the dark, compacted earth. The path accepts you immediately, and the weight on your chest instantly lifts. You are moving fast, and the silence of the clearing is already a tangible barrier behind you. You are running, but the path is so straight and smooth that it feels more like you've been launched. The trees are a blur of dark green and black on either side, and the ground seems to melt beneath your feet. You are flying back down the corridor, back toward the familiar world, but the fear is no longer about the pursuit. The terror is internal. You check your watch, or where your watch should be, but your wrist is bare. You're confused. Did you wear a watch today? You can't remember. You think about checking your phone again, but that memory is a blank too. Did you even bring it? You pause, leaning against a tree trunk, gasping for breath. The bark is rough and cold against your cheek, a small, comforting anchor of reality. This is when you realize the time is missing. You left the house sometime after noon, and you felt like you walked for 20 minutes to the clearing. You spent maybe 10 terrifying minutes inside the unnaturally perfect circle. You've been running back for, 5 minutes? You look up at the canopy. The light is nearly gone. It should be late afternoon, maybe 4,003 p.m. at the latest, but the shadows are deep and indigo, the kind of shadows that fall just before night claims the world. An hour, maybe more, has simply vanished from your memory. It's an empty space in your mind, a black hole where time should be. You remember the mainstream horror fact about the Flannan Isle lighthouse mystery, where all 3 keepers vanished in 1900, leaving behind a locked door, a half-eaten meal, and evidence of a sudden, desperate departure. What happened to them wasn't just physical disappearance. It was a disappearance from the historical record, a moment of time that simply refused to be explained or accounted for. Your missing hour feels exactly like that, an event that happened to you, but which you are not permitted to remember. You try to backtrack. What did you do in the clearing before you noticed the strange sound? You remember kneeling down to see the geometric pattern. You remember the high, wavering cello note from the ground. Then, nothing. The next clear memory is running. What happened in that blank space? Did you speak? Did you touch the pattern? Did you see the thing that was crunching behind you? The absence of the memory is suffocating, far worse than any recollection of horror could be. You start walking again, slower now, trying to coax the memory out. The path seems to resist, pushing the blankness back. You try a dark joke, forcing the mental gears to turn. Well, I guess I can't complain about my short-term memory anymore. Now I don't have any short-term memory. Silver linings, right? Maybe I'll forget I have bills to pay. That's the first joke, desperate and thin. The path that was so straight on the way in now feels like a twisting maze, designed specifically to keep you lost. Every 50 feet, there's a large, identical-looking pine tree that feels like a false marker. You start looking for the purple flower you stepped around earlier, but the path is now perfectly clean again, the soil smooth and bare. The path is not only erasing your footprints, it's erasing itself. You recall the obscure lore of the Pukwudgie, a trickster race from Wampanoag folklore, described as gray-skinned small beings who lead people off paths and into danger, often by confusing direction and playing tricks with sound and light. This path feels like a Pukwudgie's masterpiece, an engineered confusion that is guiding you, not to a destination, but to a state of permanent uncertainty. You are now profoundly disoriented. You know you are going back, because the light, what little there is coming from the direction you are walking, filtering weakly through the distant canopy. But the woods look different. The trees seem much older here than near your house, their trunks covered in shaggy black moss. You realize the path, which should be simple, is actually playing with space. It might be straight, but the land around it is bending, making your progress deceptive. You stop again. The crunching sound is not behind you anymore, but the silence feels heavier, thicker. You force yourself to state the obvious. Researchers disagree on whether the human brain's default network activity during rest and rumination is primarily focused on future planning or on the consolidation and ordering of past memories. You realize that your brain's network is utterly failing and both the future is obscured and the past is missing. You have been stripped down to a terrifying, immediate present tense. You look down at your hands again. They are dusty, still clammy. You notice a faint brownish smudge on your index finger, near the cuticle. You rub it, and the smudge is soft, tacky, like dried paint or something organic. You immediately hate the fact that you touched it. You must have picked it up during the missing hour, when you knelt down near that unsettling geometric pattern. You walk on, forcing yourself to keep up a steady pace. You realize that the path is narrowed further. Now, you have to turn your shoulders sideways slightly to avoid brushing the trees. This isn't just about erosion or growth. It's about the path becoming a claustrophobic tunnel, focusing your vision purely on the few feet directly in front of you. You need another joke, another break in the tension, but your mind is running on fumes. Well, this is one way to diet. If I keep this up, I'll be so thin I can just slide right under my front door. No need for keys. Second joke, falling flat. You feel the beginnings of despair, a paralyzing cold certainty that you are now just a captive of this strange geometric horror. You recall the feeling of the unnatural clearing, the way it rejected all life, including time. You decide that the missing hour isn't a forgotten memory, but a borrowed hour stolen by the clearing, held in reserve, and you are going to have to pay it back. You just don't know the currency. The path is winding now, finally, after being so impossibly straight. The curves are sharp, tight bends that seem to turn you back on yourself, confusing your sense of direction entirely. You come around one sharp turn, and you see something that makes you scream, a silent, internal scream that threatens to rupture your sanity. It's a tree, but not just any tree. It's the tree you leaned against just 5 minutes ago, the one with the rough, comforting bark. You know it's the same one because of a distinctive patch of silvery lichen that looks exactly like a grinning skull. You haven't been running in a straight line back to your house. You've been running in a desperate, tightening circle, trapped in a small, localized vortex created by the path's twisting logic. The path is not leading you home. It's leading you in circles, keeping you perfectly positioned for whatever is coming next. You try to move quickly, to push past the tree and find the next segment of the path, but your feet are stuck. You look down. The path isn't smooth anymore. The ground here is sticky, gummy, adhering to the soles of your shoes with a thick, syrupy resistance. You lift your foot, and it makes a sickening, tearing schlup sound. The path is fighting back, making the act of walking itself a massive, physical struggle. Your final dark joke is a simple resignation. Well, I guess I'm officially the world's first hiker to get stuck in the tar pits of existential dread. I should have worn better boots. You yank your foot free, the sticky earth letting go with a final wet gasp. You keep moving, realizing the only thing keeping you from being swallowed entirely by this place is the frantic pace of your own fear. The path twists again, and you brace yourself for the sight of the skull-lichened tree, but this time, mercifully, it is gone. You are moving forward again, but you know this forward motion is purely an illusion, a temporary kindness granted by the path's unseen architects. The twisting has stopped. The path is straightened out again, but this time, the perfect, unnatural line brings no sense of relief. It only suggests that the architects have decided your current coordinates are satisfactory for the next stage of the journey. You are no longer running, but walking with a grim, exhausted urgency, your sticky shoes leaving partial, distorted prints in the dark dust. You are acutely aware of the empty space where your memory should be, that stolen hour, now heavy with implication. It feels like an open wound in your mind, a vulnerability that the woods are exploiting. You try to recall what you saw in the geometric pattern in the clearing, but all you can recall is the feeling of it, cold, mathematical, and utterly devoid of human warmth. Then you see it. It's sitting in the middle of the path, small and tarnished. A button. Not a modern plastic button, but a flat, four-hole button made of dark, aged metal, possibly brass. It's the size of your thumbnail and coated in the same fine gray dust that covers everything here. It looks like it's been there for 100 years, yet you know, with the unsettling certainty this path provides, that it was not there when you walked in. You stop. You look around, scanning the trees, the ground, the distant gloom. Nothing moves. You approach the button slowly, cautiously. It's centered perfectly in the path. A tiny, deliberate marker. You think about the mainstream horror fact of H.H. Holmes, the notorious 19th century American serial killer who constructed his famous murder castle in Chicago. What made his crime so terrifying wasn't just the killing, but the chilling architecture of his house. The soundproof rooms, the false walls, the trapdoors, all meticulously planned to control and dispose of his victims. This path feels like an architectural extension of that mind, a design meant to be followed, not questioned, and this button feels like a misplaced, chilling detail from the tailor of the architect. You manage a shaky, dark joke. Well, look at that. The path is left a little present. Maybe it's a scavenger hunt. I hope the grand prize isn't an early burial. You decide not to touch it, stepping carefully around the metal disc, but as you pass, the air above the button feels subtly warmer than the surrounding cold. 5 minutes later, you find the next object. This one is a single, dried flower. Not the vibrant purple anomaly you avoided earlier, but a simple white daisy, completely desiccated, yet perfectly preserved, sitting upright as if planted yesterday. It is placed exactly 3 inches off the path's left edge. You realize, with a crushing certainty, that this suggests you are not alone and never have been. Someone, or something, is not just following you, but curating the path in front of you. This ties into the obscure lore of the Watcher in the Woods, a European superstition that describes a silent, non-malicious entity that simply observes and marks human journeys into the deep wilderness. It never interacts but leaves subtle signs of its presence. A stone moved, a branch snapped, a forgotten object placed in view. The intent isn't to harm, but to communicate, I see you. You are known. The difference here is that this path is new. This entity didn't find the path, it created the path, and it is now customizing the experience for you. You keep walking, your eyes fixed on the path ahead, anticipating the next unnerving gift. You feel a strange kind of gratitude mixed with paralyzing fear. The gratitude that comes from knowing the world hasn't entirely abandoned you, even if the thing watching you is utterly monstrous. You force yourself to think academically, a defense mechanism against the rising hysteria. Researchers disagree on whether the human need for pattern recognition, the tendency to see faces in clouds or sequences in random data, is a cognitive advantage derived from survival necessity, or a mere vulnerability that can be easily exploited by psychological suggestion. This path is the ultimate suggestion. You are seeing a pattern because one is being intentionally laid out, one metallic button and one dried flower at a time. You spot the third object, a small, smooth river stone not found in this region, sitting exactly on the right-hand edge of the path. It's a pale gray, unlike the dark stone you saw at the entrance, and it has a faint, almost invisible groove running down its center. You start to piece together the sequence: metal, organic, mineral. A grim, terrifying triplet that seems to be forming a ritual. You can't help but laugh, a short, bitter bark of sound. This is like the world's creepiest welcome wagon. If they leave a tiny fruitcake next, I'm calling the police. Wait, no, I'm already past that. First joke, weak but delivered. You consider picking up the stone, breaking the pattern, stopping the game, but the thought of touching it, of disrupting the sequence, brings a sudden, sharp image of the missing hour. A glimpse of the geometric pattern, now overlaid with the brownish smudge on your finger. You recoil, stepping wide around the stone. The act of seeing these objects and avoiding them is the only thing keeping you tethered to reality. You realize the path is teaching you a terrible new language, one of subtle placement and profound silence. The button says, "I am here." The flower says, "I am waiting." The stone says, "I am ready." You find yourself slowing down near a bend. You look back. You can't see the river stone, or the flower, or the button. They've been swallowed by the path's perfect erasure. But you do see something else, a faint, almost shimmering disturbance in the air, about 50 yards behind you. It's too large to be an insect, and too hazy to be a solid object. It looks like heat rising off asphalt on a summer day, but here, in the cold, deep woods, that's what has been crunching behind you, you realize. Not a heavy foot, but a displacement of air, a wake left by something moving with too much speed and too little substance. You shudder, pulling your jacket tighter. You're shivering, but not entirely from the cold. You offer a second dark joke to the shivering woods. "I wish I could leave a review for this trail. Excellent curation, terrible customer service, 5 out of 10 stars, would not recommend for a casual Sunday stroll." You realize you must be getting close to the boundary of the woods, the point where the path, so impossibly straight, started its journey. You search for the familiar look of younger trees, the sounds of distant traffic, the subtle shift in light. But the forest remains dense, dark, and utterly focused on the path. The feeling of being curated is now absolute. You are the sole participant in a performance orchestrated by an unseen entity, and the props are unsettlingly personal. You take a final deep breath, tasting the damp earth and the mineral scent of the stone. Your last dark joke is a plea for sanity. "If I make it home, I'm replacing this backyard with concrete." Nothing says I hate nature like a nice, smooth, unnatural slab of concrete. You push forward, determined to reach the light, knowing that whatever is curating this path is already preparing the final, most terrible object for you to find. The path you are on, the single, straight line that has defined your terror for the last few hours, suddenly splits. It's not a graceful divergence, it's an abrupt, clinical division. You look down, and the compacted earth of the main path meets a wide junction, creating two perfectly identical, equally straight trails disappearing into the gloom. Both paths are the same width, the same texture, and both have that same unsettling silence draped over them. You stop, your stomach clenching. This is the ultimate test of the path's psychological warfare. Before, the choice was to follow or flee. Now, the choice is between two unknowns, and the very act of choosing feels like signing a contract. You are paralyzed, looking from the left path to the right path, each one a mirror of the other, each one promising a different, equally dreadful conclusion. This brings to mind the mainstream horror fact about tulpas, thought forms from Tibetan mythology that are given so much mental energy and belief that they eventually become self-aware, physical entities. You realize that your own focus, your intense fear and concentration on the path may have given it consciousness. The path is demanding a choice because it has gained a will, and now it wants to see which direction your fear will drive you. The path has become a tulpa, and it's asking you to play its game. You crouch down, trying to find any difference between the two trails. A stray leaf, a peculiar root, a slight change in the light, anything, but they are twins, down to the last grain of gray dust. The only difference is the trajectory. The left path heads slightly north, the right path heads slightly east. Neither one feels right, yet remaining at the junction feels like inviting the hazy, shimmering thing that was following you to catch up. You remember the three objects, the metal button, the dried flower, the river stone. You check the path for a fourth, a clue, an unnerving breadcrumb, nothing. The path is clean, it has delivered you to the decision point and now stands back, waiting for you to complete the ritual. You offer a weak, dry joke to the silent intersection. Well, I guess I should have paid more attention to my high school geometry class. All those hours of studying triangles, and it all comes down to the most terrifying whys in history. It's a small, pathetic defense against the weight of the moment. You recall the obscure folklore of crossroads or liminal spaces, particularly the ancient belief that decisions made at such intersections are binding and permanent. According to some European traditions, selling your soul or making a binding pact could only be done at a crossroads where the rules of the world temporarily break down. This is not a crossroads of public roads, but a crossroads of terror, a liminal space custom built by the path's own logic. You stand up, brushing the dirt from your trousers. You realize that the absence of the crunching sound behind you is a trick. The entity doesn't need to follow you now, it only needs to wait for your decision. The moment you step onto either path, the game will resume, but with a different set of rules. You try to apply academic logic to the irrational choice. Researchers disagree on whether the choice overload phenomenon, where an overabundance of options leads to reduced satisfaction and a higher rate of decision paralysis, applies only to rational consumption decisions or extends to high-stakes, purely emotional survival scenarios. You are a living experiment in choice overload, and the outcome is likely fatal. You try to find a system. You close your eyes, count to 5, and point. You open your eyes. You are pointing directly between the two paths at the wide junction itself. The world is rejecting your attempt at randomness. You hear a sound extremely faint from the right-hand path. It's a subtle tap, like a single drop of water hitting stone, immediately followed by the whisper hiss of the woodsy silence returning. It's the smallest invitation, the tiniest suggestion. You recoil slightly, stepping back onto the stem of the Y. You look down the left path. It remains utterly silent, utterly dark, offering no sound, no hint, no clue. It is the path of pure, blind fear. The right path is the path of subtle influence. You realize the choice is less about direction and more about who or what wants you to choose. The entity that was leaving the props, the one curating your experience, just tapped a warning on the right path. It is showing its hand, making an effort. Therefore, the right path is not the path of chance. It is the path of the unseen companion's current intention. You make your second dark joke, a sudden moment of cold clarity. I'm going to choose the path that doesn't immediately murder me, so probably the one that just taps first. At least they're polite. You begin to walk decisively down the right-hand path. The moment your foot leaves the Y junction and lands on the new trail, the feeling changes. The ground feels slightly looser, less packed than the original path. It's a tiny, almost imperceptible difference, but it's enough to suggest a separate, though identical, trajectory. You walk for maybe 3 minutes, and you keep looking behind you. You expect to hear the rhythmic crunching again, or to see the shimmering heat haze. But there is nothing. The silence is absolute, and the trees on this path are beginning to look slightly different. The moss is a yellower green, and the bark seems to shed more readily. You feel a strange, hollow relief. You made a choice. The path accepted it. The journey continues. You allow yourself a final, weary laugh, a sound that doesn't quite reach your ears. Well, I've always been told I make terrible decisions. Why should a horror movie be any different? You push a strayed branch aside, and the path opens up ahead. You brace yourself for the next horror, the next clue, the next sign of the curating entity. You are walking faster now, desperate to reach the end, the sudden silence of the journey more terrifying than the noise of the pursuit. You are committed to the right path, but you have no idea where it leads, only that it starts with a tiny, silent tap. The right path feels subtly wrong. It's still straight, but now you notice the air has a different scentless mineral coldness, more a faint earthy sweetness, like rotting fruit or compost. You walk for a full 15 minutes, and the forest is denser here, the light almost completely blocked out. You are moving in near total darkness, forced to hold your hands out to feel the presence of the flanking trees. And then you hear it, not the rhythmic crunch of the watcher, not the low cello string hum of the clearing, but a sound of unmistakable, deliberate human-like action, the faint, distant sound of rhythmic thump scrape. You stop instantly, holding your breath, trying to parse the noise. Thump, a heavy object hitting soft ground. Scrape, a shovel digging in and pulling up earth. Thump scrape, thump scrape, thump scrape. It's the sound of digging. Someone, or something, is preparing something just for you, and the sound is echoing from somewhere ahead and slightly to the left, deep within the tangled wilderness off the path. The sound is so human, so common, that it is terrifyingly out of place. This is not the sound of a tulpa or a watcher. It's the sound of construction, of a grim, solitary preparation. You immediately think of the mainstream horror fact of the disappearance of the Sodder children in West Virginia in 1945, whose home burned to the ground. The remains were never conclusively found, and the family believed they were kidnapped. What made the case so enduringly disturbing was the evidence of preparation: a cut phone line, a broken truck, and the mysterious discovery of bone fragments planted at the scene 5 months later. The digging sound is preparation. It's someone anticipating your arrival. You try to move off the path, to sneak closer to the sound, but the density of the woods here is absolute. The branches are woven together like a net, and the undergrowth is a mass of thorny, unforgiving vines. The path, the only clear space, is the only place you can move. You realize this is deliberate. The path is leading you toward the digging, but it won't allow you to approach it from any angle but the front door. You retreat 2 steps backward, and the thump scrape seems to intensify, as if the sound itself is following your movement, correcting your position. You have a sudden image of the digger stopping, leaning on the shovel handle, and turning their head with a slow, grinding crunch of their neck. You try the first dark joke, a desperate internal whisper. Well, I guess I've finally found my final resting place. At least the path is straight. No one likes a crooked grave. You try to laugh, but it comes out as a dry, choked sound. The uncertainty of the purpose is the real terror. They digging a grave, a trap, a hiding spot. You realize that in the obscure lore of the Hollow Men or skinwalkers from various North American traditions, the entity often tries to lure the victim to a specific, prepared location, a cave, an abandoned cabin, or a freshly dug hole, where the transfer of identity or the final, irreversible ritual can be performed. The digging is the sound of a ceremony commencing. You force yourself to walk forward again, quickly. You need to get past the source of the sound, to outrun the completion of whatever is being constructed. As you move, the thump scrape gets louder, closer, echoing with brutal clarity in the suffocating silence. You can almost feel the vibrations in your teeth. You pause again, leaning your head against a tree trunk, feeling the rough bark. You try to rationalize it. Maybe it's just a farmer. Maybe it's a forestry crew. But no one digs in this forest, in this darkness, with this horrifying, relentless rhythm. This is the point where rational thought should be impossible, but a strange clarity descends. Historians still argue whether the concept of terra nullius, land belonging to no one, was a genuine legal principle or a convenient colonial fiction used to justify seizure of inhabited lands. The path feels like terra nullius, a space of perfect absence where the ordinary laws of property and nature don't apply, giving the digger absolute rights to their construction. You start running again, ignoring the sticky resistance of the ground. The path is now a tunnel of fear. The thump scrape is so loud it seems to be coming from both sides of the path, surrounding you, demanding your attention. You squeeze your eyes shut for a second, focusing on the scent of the sweet, rotting earth. You spot the fourth object. It's not on the ground this time, but hanging. A small, twisted length of twine tied around a low-hanging branch, swaying almost imperceptibly in the still air. It's a hangman's knot, miniature and perfect. You flinch violently, ducking under it as if it were a physical blow. You feel a wave of hysterical energy. I finally find someone in the woods, and they're starting a gardening project. I bet they don't even have a permit for that hole. Second dark joke, aimed at the unseen digger. You push on, the thump scrape now directly in front of you. You feel a sudden compulsion to yell out, to ask who was there, but the thought is instantly replaced by the terrifying certainty that you do not want to hear the answer. You want the digger to remain an impersonal sound, a disembodied action. You are about to round a bend where the sound is loudest. You are about to be confronted by the hole, the shovel, and the digger, when the ground beneath your feet gives way with a soft, surprising crunch. You stumble, catching yourself on a tree. You look down, and the path has suddenly changed from dark, sticky earth to a loose, dry layer of crushed gravel and sand, the kind used for drainage in old construction sites. It is dry, bright, and utterly unlike the rest of the path. The change in texture is so immediate that it feels like a physical trap. The thump scrape stops the instant you land on the gravel. Absolute silence returns. You are standing in the darkest part of the path, surrounded by the smell of rotting fruit, on ground that shouldn't exist, and the sound of your imminent doom has been turned off like a radio. You wait, paralyzed, your heart pounding a frantic rhythm against your ribs. The silence is the worst sound of all. It means the preparation is complete. You try your final dark joke, a desperate attempt to reset the scene. Well, I guess the maintenance crew is on a coffee break. Better hurry up before they realize I'm standing on their new driveway. You look up and realize the path is winding sharply to the right, away from the source of the digging. The gravel patch was a directional cue, a way to change the route at the last possible moment, snatching you away from the hole that was waiting. The path has saved you, but only to maintain your terror. You follow the turn immediately, leaving the ominous gravel patch behind, and the moment you step off it, the path returns to the familiar dark, sticky earth. The only sound is the frantic pounding of your own blood. You are moving on the path again, but now you have a new, crippling layer of anxiety, the certain knowledge that a hole, or whatever they were preparing, is waiting just off the trail, somewhere back in the dark behind you. The sweet, compost-like smell of the previous section is gone, replaced by the original cold, metallic scent of the path soil. You keep walking, keeping up a frantic pace, desperate to reach the familiar. You are watching the trees for any sign of a thinning canopy, any glimpse of a far-off building, anything that speaks of the world you left behind. But the trees remain dense, a suffocating, repetitive corridor of bark and shadow. You try to use the light as a guide, but the light is shifting wildly. One moment, the path ahead is indigo gloom. The next, it's a diffuse, pale gray, as if the sun has just been suddenly revealed, only to be swallowed again. The path is not only bending space, it's playing with the atmosphere. You come around a tight, final bend, and the path stops. It ends. You stop with it, your eyes wide, your breath catching in your throat. You look down and your shoes are resting on the edge of your lawn. The forest is behind you, and the late afternoon sun, the real late afternoon sun, bright and golden, is bathing the back of your house in a gentle, welcoming light. You're out, you're home. You collapse onto the grass, shivering uncontrollably, the rough, familiar texture of the lawn under your hands, the most beautiful thing you have ever felt. You turn, ready to look back at the dark mouth of the path, ready to confirm its existence, to cement the memory of its horrors. But the sight that meets your eyes is not your yard. It is the stone, The old, unmarked cold stone from Section 2, the one with the hand-chiseled crooked line pointing back the way you came. You are standing exactly at the original entrance to the path, just 10 feet from your lawn, but your lawn is not there. You are standing at the same spot you were at hours ago, when you took that first fateful step. You have completed an impossible shortcut. You stare at the stone, then back at the path behind you. It is the same impossibly straight, unnervingly silent path. You took the right path at the Y junction, and it led you not forward, but in a complete, localized circle, using a twisted geometry that defies physics. The entire journey, the missing time, the unnatural clearing, the curating objects, the sound of the digging, all of it happened on a loop, a short circuit that started and ended at the cold marker stone. This is the ultimate, mind-bending terror. You remember the mainstream horror fact about the Amityville Horror, the famous haunting in New York State. What made that story so compelling was the sense of inescapable, self-contained dread, the house itself becoming the prison, the entity, and the victim. This path is your Amityville. It is a dimensional wormhole custom built for your demise, and you have just confirmed that there is no out, only a repeated journey back to the start. You try to stand up, but your legs won't cooperate. You are suddenly overcome by a terrible, soul-deep weariness, the fatigue of traveling the impossible. You look at the path again. It seems shorter now, almost inviting, urging you to take that first step again. You try a dry, bitter joke. Well, I guess I found the perfect way to get my 10,000 steps in. I just wish I could claim the mileage reward. I'm thinking a free coffin should do it. You laugh, a harsh, painful sound that dies instantly in the path's oppressive silence. You reach out and touch the stone this time. It is radiating coldness. But now you feel something else. A faint, rhythmic vibration, the thump scrape of the shovel, coming from somewhere deep inside the stone itself, like a tiny heart of malice. This sudden, impossible return brings up the obscure lore of the eternal return or the time slip, a concept in paranormal accounts where individuals find themselves suddenly transported to the past, often on the same road or path. Your experience is not a return to the past, but a temporal fold. A confirmation that the path controls time and space within its bounds, keeping you forever within its logic. You look down at the stone again, focusing on the crooked line etched into it. It is pointing directly back down the path, urging you to start over. You realize that the path didn't just appear near your house, it ended at your house, and its starting point is here, at the loop. You force yourself to think. Researchers disagree on whether the human brain can truly comprehend the fourth dimension, or if our sensory input is strictly limited to three-dimensional perception, leading to cognitive collapse when confronted with multidimensional phenomena. You are experiencing the cognitive collapse right now. This is a four-dimensional prank, and you are the only punchline. You stand up, moving back onto your own lawn, away from the stone. The light feels warmer, the air smells cleaner, and the faint, distant sound of a passing car is a symphony of normalcy. You are standing in the world, looking at the horror. You notice your sticky shoes, the dark, damp dust caked on them. You realize you brought the path with you. You have tracked the alien geometry onto your own familiar ground. You look down at the two dark footprints you made on your lawn, just 2 feet away from the path entrance. The grass beneath the prints is already turning brown, dying where the dust of the path touched it. Your final dark joke is a tired, weary whisper. I need a shower, a large drink, and probably about 50 years of therapy, but I guess I'll settle for not walking down that damn path again. You turn your back on the woods and walk toward your house, the comforting, solid shape of the structure, a desperate promise of safety. You are out of the loop, but you know the path is waiting, patient, and that you have carried a piece of it with you onto your own lawn. You just need to figure out how to get inside before it catches up. You are walking across your lawn, the familiar, slightly uneven ground feeling like a miracle beneath your feet. The sun is low, casting long, peaceful shadows, and you can hear the distant, reassuring sound of a dog barking, a chaotic, living sound that couldn't exist in the vacuum of the path. You don't look back at the stone. You don't look back at the path. Your only goal is the back door, the solid wood, the deadbolt. You're about halfway across the yard when you feel the first drop. It's heavy, cold, and splatters against the back of your neck. You glance up. The sky is clear, a peaceful, cloudless amber and gold twilight, yet drops of water are falling. It's a localized shower concentrated entirely on your backyard. It's not a sprinkler, not a leaky gutter. It's rain, but only on your property. A short, sharp, terrifying burst that starts and ends within the confines of your fence line. It lasts for maybe 20 seconds, just long enough to saturate the lawn and turn the dark dust on your shoes into black, clinging mud. You stop, shaking your head, trying to clear the sudden, cold disorientation. You turn to look back at the path entrance. The path itself, the actual